Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Kids aren't getting along with each other. As a parent, have you heard this before? Hey, that's my toy. Give it back. No way. I found it first, so it's mine now. You're just being unfair. I left it there for a moment and you swooped in and took it without even asking me. Well, you should have just been more careful then. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. And on it goes. And as their stress levels rise, so do yours. Sibling fighting can be a common challenge within families. Some children get along well, most of the time, and others are just in a constant battle with each other over many things that might seem insignificant to us, but are sometimes important. At times it's a good idea to let them sort their own battles out. However, many children do not actually have natural negotiation skills, and this doesn't always work out to be the best solution. There are several strategies you can use to help resolve and manage conflicts between your children. The first is to encourage your siblings to express their feelings and concerns in a calm and respectful manner. Teaching them active listening skills and the importance of understanding each other's perspectives is very important. As parents, establish clear guidelines for behaviour, such as no physical violence, name-calling, or personal insults. Make sure all siblings are aware of the consequences for breaking these rules and ensure that these consequences do take place if the rules are broken. Teach your children the importance of finding common ground and reaching agreements, and encourage them to take turns or to find win-win solutions that address both of their needs. Help your children to develop the skills to manage conflicts constructively. For example, identifying the issue, brainstorming solutions, and evaluating the outcomes. And encourage your siblings to empathise with each other's feelings and perspectives, and help them to understand that their actions and words can have an impact on others. When I was a child, many, many moons ago, the battles my three brothers and I had were often solved by my parents with very simple solutions. The oldest child got to sit in the front seat of the car, even when we became adults. Everyone took turns setting the table, and the minute that anyone fought with each other inside the house, which was very small, we were all booted out into the cold or the warmth, whatever it may be, whether we were involved in that fight or not. Now, this worked in an odd way. What would happen was that those not involved in the dispute would try to sort out the ones who were fighting, as they knew they were going to be part of the punishment. We learned our own negotiating skills without parental reinforcement. It was worth it to stay inside. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could work out your children's personality differences and how you could create effective communication between them? Today I'm talking to Sandra Etherington. Sandra is the host of the Family Personalities podcast and is an MBTI and MMTIC practitioner. Sandra has a love of models that help us understand human behaviour and our interactions with each other. She uses her passion and experience with personality type models to help parents guide their children more effectively and compassionately based on their unique wiring and needs. Today, Sandra is going to talk to us about the difference in the preference, thinking and feeling and how it impacts her children's relationships. Remembering that thinking-orientated children might tend to approach situations with logic and objective analysis, emphasising fairness and justice. And feeling-orientated children may emphasise empathy, harmony and personal values in their decision-making, considering the impact on others' feelings. Using her knowledge of type, Sandra is teaching her children to communicate openly with each other and in doing so encouraging compromise and the use of their negotiation and conflict resolution skills, all while promoting empathy and understanding. And as always, it's a work in progress. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Hello, Sandra. Welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you on today.
I'm so glad to be here.
Now, can you tell us where you are in the world? I'm in Australia. So where are you today?
I'm in the United States on the West Coast in Oregon.
In Oregon. Wow. So what's your weather like? You're coming into summer.
Yeah, it's we're kind of in a mountainous area, so we get a long cold winter, but we're just starting to warm up. We had a beautiful 65 and sunny today.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. So, so we do Celsius over here. So
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. It's still cool for us. That's still pretty cold if that's a nice day.
It's a nice like warm spring day. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Now listen, you and I, as we've discussed, are passionate about personality types and using them with your family and just different ways of connecting with people. So tell me, how did your journey start into all of this? Where did it all begin?
Yeah. So it was, as with most people, it was, being typed myself. I actually ran across it in the business world, and it was people that I was working with were in a typing workshop, and I wasn't actually in it, but they all came back from that workshop talking about it. Specifically, someone who I was dating at the time was talking about it, and he was like, well, I'm a, whatever. And then he told me he had, the audacity to tell me what I was.
And did he get it right?
You're a blah, 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 blah. And then he came to the J versus P, and he goes, and you're a judging type. And I was like, excuse me? And I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, how dare you call me like judging or whatever? And so, of course, I had to go online and read all about it. And he was right. I am a judging type. But it got me really curious about it. And when I went on and, kind of figured out my own type, and I read by the way, my type preferences are INFJ. Mm-hmm. And when I read the INFJ description, I was just like blown away. I kept looking over my shoulder, like, is this some sort of like practical joke? Like, who wrote this about me? And I was just kind of blown away, and I felt like I had to know more. Like, who put this model together, and how could it figure these things out about me? So that's where it all started. And eventually, when I had kids, I just began to wonder, could I figure this out about them yet? And it just kind of all went from there.
So what other personality tools do you use?
I really love Enneagram also.
Yes.
I'm not officially trained in that, but no. I love to dabble in it.
Yeah. And you did professional training around the MBTI yourself to become a facilitator. Yeah. And that is the way that a lot of people get in. And I actually spoke to someone the other day that said to me, until you actually did my type, Kate, I used to hate you saying I was a judging type. This is in our workplace.
They really need to change the wording there.
They do. It does sound really stressful. She said, now I know I actually am. And I said to her, yes, you're the only structured person in our organisation. Like, you poor girl, this is really stressful for her. But it is really interesting when you bring it back to family, because I'm like you. Same thing. I kind of worked it out, and I went to a course in the end to do mine as well. And when I had my kids, I was the same. I just thought, oh my goodness, this is so impactful on family and relationships and the partner that you're with. But I think the business world get the best because they get to utilize it. No parents, as you and I know, where do we ever find out about parenting with type or type itself unless you've been in the business world? Because that's usually where this instrument's delivered in that sense. Yeah. So tell me about your children. How old and who are they? And when did you first start being able to tell what kind of type they were?
Yeah, so I have two kiddos at home with me. One who is, my son is 10, and he has INTJ preferences. And then I have a daughter who is turning 8 next month, and she has ISFP preferences. And then I also have a stepdaughter who doesn't live with us, and she has ESTP preferences. So she likes to throw it all out of whack when she comes to stay with us, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, which is great because my daughter's ESTP, and she is such a questioner of everything. I'm not sure what yours is like, but I call her the detective.
Yeah, mine is, she's an Enneagram 7, and she's just a ton of fun. Like, she comes and we just have just a ton of fun.
Excellent.
And it's different when you have a kid who does live with you versus doesn't also, so it's, we just see her for a couple weeks at a time, and it's just like, we just have a lot of fun. It's like a party when she's here.
Well, that's a perfect way to do it, isn't it? I think, when you get to, and when yours leave, hopefully that'll be a similar thing. That's the way, well, Cass has left home and Jack's on his way out. And that's the way it is. When they come home, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's really good fun. You're not supposed to be telling them too much at that time, although
Right.
I do. But you think you don't, but I do. So tell me, what age did you notice any first preference? Like, what was the first thing you noticed about them?
The introversion was really early and easy to tell, especially with my son, who is the one with INTJ preferences. It was a little bit harder to tell with my ISFP, maybe because of that feeling preference. There was that kind of like human connection. It was a little harder to land on introversion for her. But yeah, I would say introversion was early, even from the time they were a baby. You could compare them to like babies and other babies and toddlers who were just much more like making eye contact and like, running over to people and like connecting with the other babies and toddlers much more quickly and like, that sort of thing.
And this is where I find this really, really important, because in today's society, people are actually starting, that kind of behaviour isn't really accepted, to be not having too much eye contact. And people are looking at it as a problem more than going, hey, listen, is this just who they are? That this isn't a natural process for them. They're not necessarily on a spectrum of things. They could just feel right when they're playing alone and when they are by themselves, which is very true. And I think it's true. It is one of the easiest things for people to recognise. So, people listening, that's often that's how I recognised initially. What was the next thing that you kind of could put into place?
Let's see. You're taking me way back. My son was so... I would say probably his thinking preference. Or is it the judging one? I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. There's just definitely, probably I would say the judging preference, because he definitely wanted things the way he wanted them. He really wanted that control over his outer world. And he was always like telling us how he wanted things and telling us where he wanted to be and how to put things. Whereas my daughter, who has that perceiving preference, definitely would like fit into her world a little bit more and kind of go with the flow a little bit more. So yeah, I would say judging preference next.
So if you were someone looking for that judging preference in a child, what would you specifically kind of look at? Would it be an organizational thing or a time thing?
I would say it probably depends on what the other type preferences are too. You kind of have to look at the specific child. But yeah, I always look at judging versus perceiving as, are they making the world what they want it to be, or are they taking the world as it comes to them, kind of a thing. And it's, it's like, I know that's very like intuitive, because I'm not giving you specific examples.
That's right.
But I'm like, just taking the vibe of your child and figure it out that way. Sorry, it was very non-specific.
No, that's okay, because it's great talking to an intuitive, because I'm very detailed, so I'm a sensing type. So, so for things for me was that my child kept everything very tidy. Which, and as a perceiver,
I don't have that with
I
either
was
of my
blown
children.
away, because well, not everything really, but his toy cupboard and the things he loved. Whereas my daughter's a perceiver as well, and even though when they go through their teen years, everything is a floor robe and it's a mess, he still kept a level of, in his teens, he also still kept a level of tidiness that wasn't teenage, going through all of that stuff, whereas she didn't. And she says to me, I am tidy. So we don't have that discussion too often around her. But now she's moved out. She's very tidy. So what would be the next one? How would you pick, say, the feeling type in your child?
Yeah, so this is I would say it's the biggest one now, probably all along since they've started interacting with one another, that we have the biggest conflicts between them is their feeling and thinking difference. And now I'm going to step into another model also, the Enneagram. I'm not sure of my son's Enneagram type, but my daughter is very obviously an Enneagram 4.
And what does that mean?
They feel things very deeply. They can be quite dramatic. And so that's like layering on top of the fact that she's a feeling type. But they take things very personally. Whereas my son, who is a thinking type, he is most comfortable, just kind of the definition of thinking, right? They're most comfortable making decisions by stepping out of a situation emotionally, considering, objective logical data. And so when he's saying things to her, he's going to say them truthfully and honestly, not necessarily thinking, how's she going to feel when I say this? And then she is, on the other hand, as someone with a feeling preference, is most comfortable making decisions by stepping into a situation emotionally, considering feelings, values, desires of herself and others. And so anything he says, she's going to immediately take personally. So that's a big clash. And I like to use this example from when they were pretty young, maybe like 4 and 6, somewhere in that range. And they were coloring together in another room. And I overheard them and, just doing coloring pages, coloring a unicorn or something like that. And I hear my daughter, who's 2 years younger than my son, so she's like 4-ish, he's like 6-ish. And she says, Riker, do you like my coloring that I did? And I'm sure I'm just like picturing her, I'm in the other room, picturing her holding it up to him. And I'm like holding my breath because I know she just wants approval. And I'm like, I don't know if she's going to get what she's looking for here, And he says, no, I don't like it. You colored out of the lines. And there was something else he didn't like he didn't like the color of it or something like that. Like, ooh, orange, And immediately she just starts crying. And myself, as someone who has a preference for feeling, my immediate reaction is to want to be like, oh, that's mean. Why would you say that, But as someone who knows type, I know, it's not, his intent was not to be mean. His intent was not to hurt her feelings. He's just answering
a question,
honestly, and it's somewhere along the way. Yeah, somewhere along the way, he learned that good coloring, stays in the line. So he's just communicating, maybe even trying to be helpful by saying like, "Oh, let me help you improve your
coloring,
your future drawing."
Right. He's so kind.
Yeah, and so this is just it's grown with their ages, and we have lots of problems like this.
I was working with a parent who was worried about their kid because they didn't focus in class on the details and they were worried they were going to get low grades. And then this child was given a project, which was something he could run with, and his attitudes and grades went through the roof. He was in his element. Do you and your child need to find their point of difference so they can fly? Let me help you unravel some of the enigmas of their personality and enjoy parenting a kid that you actually understand. After all, parenting's supposed to be fun. Let's chat. thepersonalitycoach.com.au. Because people don't realise also that the thinking will often, as particularly us feeling types, it took me a long time because I have 3 thinkers in my family. So it took me a long time before I actually understood that my children were as well, because they kept saying stuff and I kept correcting them. Like, no, you can't think like that. No, that's not kind, like you're saying. And knowing and understanding it, because when they were young, I hadn't done the MBTI when they were that young. So knowing and understanding that it's actually not unkind, it's actually a logical conversation is a really tricky thing. And particularly even in today's society, because we try to make everything soft and warm around things, that for thinking types, they often get in trouble for just saying something. And my family will go, well, you were really lucky I told you that was out of the lines, because if someone else had seen it, they might have really not liked it either. So it's a helping thing for them. They really look at it as helping someone out, don't they? It's like, so how do you go? Because this is teaching kids at an early age how other people are different, isn't it? So what negotiation techniques do you use? Like, how do you get them, because when you explain to a thinker, my guys just go in their heads. Yeah. Really? Do I have to be soft? Oh, yeah. Here we go. So how do you explain that at an early age?
Yeah, it's really tough. And what I'm trying to do is teach them type and like, hey, you guys approach things differently and that's okay. And also teach them the value of both of those approaches. And so that they kind of learn to honor themselves and like appreciate themselves, but also honor the other person and appreciate the other person. So I don't think I did a good job of that in the beginning. I think that we all have our own biases, right? And my bias was for feeling. And so I would spend a lot of time like validating and honoring my daughter's approach and comforting her feelings in that moment. And then I'd try and teach my son, you know, I would try and do it empathetically, saying like, oh, I know you're just trying to tell the truth, but here's how you could do it better. Here's how you could be more like a feeler, you know, like let me help you out and be more like a feeler. And I'm trying to stay away from that. And it's really hard though. Like I really just want him to be a feeler.
You do.
Gosh.
Is the easiest thing to teach him? So you're saying the easiest thing to teach, because really he's never going to be a feeler. And that's, like you say, that's never going to happen. How do you turn it from being, oh, don't be mean, don't be whatever, into a practical, like a better sense for him? Yeah.
So first of all, I found that depending on the situation and depending on how escalated everyone's feelings are, a lot of times in the moment is not a great time to address it, especially with my daughter with the feeling. When her emotions are escalated, if you think about it, talking about type is a logical thing, right? It's addressing emotions. And so the more emotional she is, the less she can access her logic. So a lot of times it's addressing both of their feelings in the moment. You're upset because of this. You're upset because of this. Maybe we need to take a time out and then we can talk about it later when everyone's calmed down. I found that
Great
really
idea.
helps. And then when everyone's in a good mood is a really good time to have like a talk about type. Maybe we can bring up the situation that happened before, or a totally different situation, but explaining thinkers really, it can help if you explain feelings in logical terms. So they'll understand the situation better if you can be like, let's take the coloring example. For example, when you told your sister that her coloring was out of the lines and that you didn't like it, that made her feel bad because she felt like then she's a bad artist. And then that made her feel bad inside. So that's what happened. That's why she cried. And then you don't say, oh, you're mean for doing that, right? Instead, you honor their way of being. Like you can say, you like to say the truth as you see it, and that's okay. And then you can point out, your sister is a little different from you. She likes to communicate in a way that's sensitive to the feelings of others, and likes when people communicate that way to her. And when they don't, she takes things personally, and that's okay too. And then I could have the opposite conversation with her. And so that way they see who they are and they see who the other person is. And it's slow. Like you have to do this often. It's not like they're going to get it with one conversation.
And it's a lifetime slow. Yeah. I'm sitting here with my guys because it is that you don't want to negate it. I mean, I think that, I was with a group of accountants once and they were all ISTJs, and I was talking about feelings with them, and I said to them, look, you really need to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And so someone put their hand up and they said, oh, you mean manipulate them? And, shock and horror. I'm a feeling type, and I'm like, oh, you don't use the word manipulate when you're... And I thought, look, this is my audience. And I looked to them all and I said, yes, manipulate. And they all nodded their heads right. That was it. They had it all down. So I said, if you manipulate them, really what you're doing is you're getting to do them something in a kind way that might not be your way, but you're getting to do something that you want them to do. So, if that's how you look at it. And I went home and I told my family, and I said, I can't believe that they thought it was manipulating people. And they all nodded their head and said, well, you are, aren't you? So you go, okay. So for them, it's often a different word too that appeals to them. And I think that you're right. I think teaching them type early, I taught my children from when I knew, they always roll their eyes down and go, oh my God, here goes mum again. But teaching type early is amazing. If your kids have the knowledge, you have the knowledge, because it gives them a great understanding of self.
Yeah.
And why am I hurt by this? You know, why are people not talking to me if I'm saying it straight? Go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say, and it helps I think it helps depersonalize it and take the sting out of things. It's like that we can put a model to this. We can understand it. I don't know. It just helps it be less like, well, you know, you're mean because you're doing this. It's like, oh no, now I understand what's underneath it. And I don't know. I just love those kind of things. Obviously, that's why I've centered my life around it. But
that's right. And if you listen to the conversation, I say to people, listen to the conversation. Is it mean? Are they calling you names or anything like that? Or is it actually just logical, straightforward language? Because once you differentiate that, then you can sit back as a feeling type and go, oh, well, actually, they weren't being mean to me. It was straight and I didn't really like it.
Right.
But it wasn't mean.
Yeah.
My husband used to say things to me like, when I had tight jeans on, you know, did you jump off the wardrobe to get into those? Or pimples on my face, who are your friends today? You know, I'm looking thinking you've got to be kidding. But there's no gentle approach. You know, when my son was a teenager and he had quite bad pimples, my husband, who's a thinking type, said to him, oh, my God, you can't go to the house with a face full of pus like that. That's disgusting. And my son, of course, stormed off really upset. And I said to my husband, couldn't you have put it a little more gently? You know, like, Jack, just go and have a little look in the mirror and just see if there's anything you feel you might need to fix up. And he said, I'm saving him. I'm helping him, because if he went out looking like that, then people would judge him and they would look at him. So he said, I'm actually helping him out. So what I say also is that I don't think thinking type people actually, when they say thinking type comments to each other, they actually don't always like that either.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, they still like, you always have to remember that someone with thinking preferences still has feelings.
That's right.
Yes. I have seen my son get his feelings hurt. I know he has feelings.
Yeah. And when they get hurt, you kind of think, but honey, this is something you said to someone else yourself. You know, like, but they kind of can't hack it back. It's kind of not the turnaround. Yeah. So what with your two and this thing, you were talking about an article that you had written once, and you'd written it to the type organisation, and their feedback on the way that you had addressed it. What was that around? Yeah,
so this article, it's actually was just talking about this coloring example. So yes. It's on the website People Stripes, and they're a really great resource too for typing kids. And it was basically, you know, this coloring scenario and just a reflection of myself and my parenting and kind of weighing that, like, oh, should I be teaching my son these social rules or not? And I did a whole podcast episode on it with someone too, because sometimes I feel so torn. It's like these social rules might also help you too, you know, because the fact is they're out there, these social rules about not hurting people's feelings, and you can be excluded from things. You can be shunned by people if you're not aware of how to make sure you're not hurting people's feelings. So I had someone on the podcast to chat about that, because I felt like it deserved more attention after I wrote that article. But the article is called, what did I call that article? Something about sibling conflict, but you're going to put it in the show notes, right?
Yes. So my thing
Navigating sibling conflict, I think it was called.
Because my thing was, even though people might say, look, you know, you can't say that. I do say that to my adult children, and I have said it to them. Sometimes they say stuff to me and I say, oh, you would never say that to anyone else, would you? And they say, no, we've been listening to you for long enough. We wouldn't even bother saying that to anybody else. And I say, well, thank goodness for that, because I personally do think it's important to kind of warn thinking types or whatever that, do you know what, that might hurt someone. If that's okay if you say it, but do expect a different reaction, you know, because not all people are going to actually take that on board. So, you know, I kind of think that the level of that is there. This is me feeling type talking. That they need to know that maybe they won't have as many friends if they tell them they're colouring out of the lines and I don't like the work you've done and what have you. I don't know.
Yeah, my guest had INTJ preferences, and she's a mom, and that was, you know, her. And I wanted to speak to someone who was a thinker, so it wasn't just like the feeling, you know, perspective. And she felt like she'd been done a disservice as a child because she hadn't been taught social rules, And she said, I don't want to be forced to use them. I want to make the choice of whether I use them or not. But knowing that they're there, being explicitly taught them, and then I can choose whether or not to use them, was kind of her conclusion. And, I'm sure other people have different opinions.
I'm sure they do, but I think that's a great conclusion. It's always good to know both sides of everything, especially as you're growing up. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that if you don't know and understand type and you're listening, it's really important to look at it because it can be a great cause of conflict. Not necessarily there can be a lot of fighting over that rather than things that you think the argument might be coming from, and picking up the pieces afterwards is really important. Thanks for joining me today, Sandra. It's been really lovely to have you on and sharing your wisdom. And I love having a fellow personality podcaster on with me. It's wonderful. And we'll catch up with you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So be a role model. Set positive examples by demonstrating effective conflict resolution skills, and even treating your own adult siblings, if you have them, with respect and kindness. Plan activities that encourage siblings to work together and have fun, such as family outings, games, or projects. Building positive experiences can strengthen their relationship. Seek mediation if necessary. If the conflicts persist and become unmanageable, consider involving a third neutral party, such as a family therapist or counsellor, to mediate and help resolve the issues. Remember, resolving sibling fighting takes time and patience. It's important to remain consistent with your efforts and provide ongoing support for your children as they learn to navigate their relationship. Knowing and understanding your children's MBTI type will give you and them a great insight into understanding who they are. And this is a monumental step in their lifelong journey of self-discovery. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review. That would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.